When my wife died giving birth to our son, I moved back into my childhood home. It was a temporary fix, just until I got on my feet. The place had been empty since my parents passed, and the memories, while dusty, were warmer than the cold apartment where I'd spent the last few years. I was alone now, except for my son, Lucas. He was 2 weeks old when the strange things began. It started with the baby monitor. I'd bought a simple audio-only unit, just enough to hear when Lucas cried during the night. No cameras, no motion sensors, nothing fancy. Just white plastic, 2 parts, one in his nursery, one on my nightstand. The first night I plugged it in, I heard a faint humming. I figured it was interference. The house was old. But then the humming turned into something else. Not words, just tones, like someone trying to sing without a mouth. I went to the nursery. Lucas was sleeping soundly. Back in my room, the monitor still hummed. I unplugged it and went to bed, telling myself it was a malfunction. I was exhausted and still grieving. The mind plays tricks. The next night, it happened again, soft, shuffling, like cloth brushing against the microphone. Then a whisper, almost childlike.
Shh, don't wake Daddy.
I bolted out of bed and ran to the nursery. Lucas was still in his crib, quiet. Up the air was freezing, like I'd stepped into a walk-in freezer. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. I searched the room, the closets, the corners, under the crib. Nothing. Back in my room, I listened to the monitor again, just static. The third night broke me. I had barely slept. I kept the monitor off, but couldn't stop thinking about the voice. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. But what else could it be? At 2:13 a.m., I woke to Lucas screaming. Not crying, screaming. I raced into the nursery, flipped on the light. He was sitting upright in the crib, something he wasn't strong enough to do. He stared at the corner of the room, mouth open, eyes glassy, shrieking so hard his face was turning red. I ran to pick him up, but the moment I touched him, he went limp in my arms, just stopped crying and fell asleep instantly, like nothing had happened. I looked at the corner he'd been staring at, and there, just barely, I saw it. A handprint, small, pressed into the wall, like the paint had softened under invisible fingers. I threw the monitor away and got a new one, with video this time, and set it up the next day. That night, I kept it open on my phone screen, refusing to sleep. At midnight, Lucas rolled over. Nothing strange. At 1 a.m., he was still quiet. Then, 1:47, the screen flickered. Lucas was asleep, but there was something moving behind the crib. Something low. I turned up the brightness, squinted, and there it was. An outline, like a child, maybe 5 or 6, crouched beneath the window. Its body was wrong. Limbs too thin, head cocked too far to one side. Then it stood and walked out of frame, not toward the door, but toward the camera. I ran to the nursery, phone in hand. Lucas was still asleep, but the camera, brand new, was lying on the floor. Lens cracked straight down the middle and etched into the wall were the words, "Tuck him in." I called a priest, not even out of faith, just desperation. He came, blessed the room, muttered prayers while clutching a silver cross. Afterward, I asked the priest if he felt anything. He looked at me, pale and sweating, and said, "Whatever's here, it isn't human." I started digging through old records. Family history. I called my aunt, the only one still alive who knew anything about this house. She hesitated when I asked if anything strange had happened when I was a baby. Finally, she said,
You had a sister. She was born before you. Lived only a few weeks. Something was wrong with her. She never cried. Never moved much. Your parents, they didn't talk about it. After she died, they buried the memory.
What was her name? I asked.
Sarah.
I went to the basement. The far corner had always creeped me out, but now I knew why. I started pulling up the floorboards, and after a few hours, I found it. A tiny box. Inside, a moldy blanket, a baby rattle, and a tag from the hospital. Sarah Grayson. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every room in the house felt wrong. The baby monitor I had trashed? It was back on my nightstand, plugged in and turned on. At 2:13 a.m., it crackled to life, and a voice said,
Tuck him in.
I moved out the next day. Lucas and I live in a small apartment now. It's cheap, ugly, but clean. He's doing well, laughs often, and sleeps through the night. But sometimes, just before dawn, I hear a whisper from the baby monitor.
Tuck him in.
And when I rush to check on him, Lucas is fine, but the blanket is always folded just slightly wrong, like someone else had tucked him in. When I bought the house, I didn't know about the crawl space. It wasn't on the floor plan. The realtor didn't mention it. Hell, even the inspector didn't seem to notice. But I found it during my second week here, while chasing a rat behind the water heater. There was a square panel in the basement wall, painted the same dull gray as the concrete. No handle, just a subtle outline and a pair of tiny holes where a lock used to be. Naturally, I opened it. Behind the panel was a dark, narrow tunnel, just high enough to crawl through on hands and knees. The air that came out smelled like wet wood and old breath. I should have sealed it back up right then, but instead, I got a flashlight. It stretched farther than I expected, at least 15 feet in before it opened into a low, square room. The walls were unfinished, exposed beams and dirt-packed insulation. The floor was dust, but there were things. Old toys, a pair of rusted scissors, a child's shoe, soaked in something dark, and written on the wooden beam at the far end, "Don't feed her." That was it. No context, no explanation. I backed out quickly, heart thudding, and spent the rest of the night with every light on in the house. Once I'd calmed down, I guessed it was just leftover junk from a previous owner, someone's forgotten playroom, or maybe a failed DIY project. The message? A prank or a joke. I sealed the panel with screws and covered it with a shelf. But 2 nights later, I heard a voice, not in the walls, not in the ceiling, under the floor, right beneath my bed. It was slow, rhythmic.
I'm hungry.
I froze, listened, told myself it was mice, rats, pipes, but then came again.
I'm still hungry.
I couldn't sleep after that. In the morning, I went back to the crawl space. The screws I'd driven in, they were on the floor. The panel was ajar, and I pushed it closed again and wedged furniture in front of it. I called pest control and had the place checked top to bottom. They found nothing. No rodents, no drafts, no signs of entry or damage. Just a very old, very quiet house. I sprinkled baby powder across the floor of my bedroom and hallway, just to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. If something was moving through the house, it would leave marks. At 3:41 a.m., I heard the whisper again.
You said you'd feed me.
I didn't move. Not until morning. When I turned on the lights, my stomach dropped. There were footprints in the powder. Tiny ones, bare feet. They led from the crawl space all the way to my bed. But here's the part that made my throat close up. There were only footprints going to my bed, none going back. I opened the crawl space again. There was a new message written on the beam. I don't like waiting. And beneath it, a gift, a mouse. It had been gutted and laid out carefully, like a ritual. Spine cracked, eyes removed. I vomited right there in the dirt. The next few days were worse. Every night at 3:41, she spoke. sometimes in whispers, sometimes in wet, broken sobs.
I'm still hungry. You forgot me. I'll come and eat you.
Once, I heard her crawling through the walls. She moved like an insect, quick bursts and sudden stops. I hammered at the drywall, jumped at the slightest sound, and slept with a butcher knife on my chest. I stopped going to work, stopped answering texts, and barely ate. The only thing that mattered was the voice. Eventually, I snapped. I crawled back into that space, dragging a bag of raw meat, and I threw it into the corner, screamed, "Here, take it, eat, leave me alone!" And for a moment, there was silence. Then the meat slid into the darkness, and something smiled at me. I didn't see a face. Not really. Just teeth. Crooked. Grinning in a place no face should be. That night, there was no voice. No noises. No whisper. I slept for the first time in days. And the next morning, I told myself it was over. I'd fed her, whatever she was, but the quiet didn't last long. The following week, I noticed a child playing on my lawn. A girl, pale, thin, filthy blonde hair, white dress stained gray. I went outside, asked if she was lost. She didn't answer, just looked at me, and smiled with the same crooked teeth, the same grin. She pointed at me and whispered,
You made me stronger.
That night, I heard her crawling through the attic.
One day, I'll be big enough to walk up the stairs. One day, I won't need to crawl anymore.
I can't leave the house. I tried once. I packed my car and drove away, but every road circled back. Every street name changed while I was driving. After 6 hours, I was parked in my driveway again. I think she's waiting for me to die. Or worse, waiting for me to adopt her. Sometimes, I find drawings in the kitchen, stuck to the fridge. Stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands, labeled me and Daddy. If you ever find a crawl space that wasn't supposed to be there, seal it. Don't look inside. And above all, don't feed her. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Old houses always have a scent, dust, wood, mold, but this one, it had something beneath all that, like iron, like pennies on a wet tongue. I didn't want the house. My sister left it to me after the accident, and I would have sold it in a heartbeat, but it came with Mia, her daughter, my niece. Just 7 years old, she had survived the crash. No one knows how, as the car was flattened. My sister and her husband were barely identifiable. But Mia? Not a scratch. Not even a mark on her dress. The doctors said trauma can do strange things, that she might not speak for a while, that it was normal for kids to act distant after something like that. But from the moment I picked her up, Mia didn't seem traumatized. She seemed still, not calm, not scared, just unnervingly, inhumanly still. The first night in the house, I put her in her old room. She walked in without a word, sat on the bed, and stared at the wall. I sat up on the couch downstairs, lights on, half watching late-night television while listening for sounds from upstairs. There were none, just silence, until 3:12 a.m. That's when I heard the laughter. High, girlish, muffled, coming from the baby monitor I dug out of storage. I rushed up, heart pounding, thinking maybe Mia had finally snapped out of it. But when I opened the door, she wasn't laughing. She was sitting in the same place, staring at the wall, completely expressionless. The monitor still buzzed with that laughter until I unplugged it. The next day, I asked her if she was okay. She blinked slowly, then said,
She's happy I'm back.
"Who?" Mia tilted her head.
The girl in the walls.
I stared at her. "There's no one in the walls, honey."
She lives here, and she missed me.
Then Mia smiled. and I swear to God, I saw 2 rows of teeth. That night, I closed Mia's door and locked it. I needed sleep. I needed to think. At 3:12, the laughter came again. Not from the monitor, from the walls. I sat up, holding the blanket to my chest like a child. The sound skittered through the plaster, running feet, nails dragging, whispering too fast to catch. I punched the wall, and the sound stopped. I called a therapist, made an appointment for Mia. The doctor said she never spoke during the session, just drew the same picture over and over. 2 girls holding hands. One was Mia. The other was wrong. Larger, teeth like needles, hair made of what looked like worms. I tried to leave the house to take Mia to a hotel, but every time she'd vanish. I'd turn around and she'd be gone. Then I'd find her standing on the doorstep with dirt on her dress and something black under her fingernails.
I can't go. She'll get mad.
I started staying awake at night. 3:12 came like clockwork, and it was always the same. The giggling, the dragging, sometimes whispering in the vents. One night, I took a hammer and started tearing into the drywall. Behind Mia's bedroom wall, I found a crawl space, too small for anyone to live in, but someone had been in there. Old dolls, twisted and burned, fingernail carvings all over the wood, and a single word written on the walls, over and over and over: Mia. The next night, I set up a camera in her room. Mia didn't react. She just sat on the bed as usual. At 3:12, as I watched the footage from the lounge, I saw the wall behind Mia open. Not like a door, more like it peeled and a girl stepped out. She looked like Mia, but taller, grayer, hunched in a way bones shouldn't bend. She crawled onto the bed, mouth wide, unhinged. And then, she climbed inside Mia, like a shadow slipping into skin. Mia blinked once, slow and deliberate, then stared directly into the camera and smiled at me.
You're next.
She mouthed. I sat frozen in horror as I tried to scream. Mia left her bedroom and came into the lounge. She climbed onto my chest and whispered inside my ear,
Hello, Uncle Michael.
and I finally understood. The crash did take my sister's daughter and left something else behind, and I felt her climb inside me as the darkness enveloped me. Now, we are part of the house. Mia and I will be together forever. If you ever hear laughter at 3:12, if you ever see a little girl staring at a wall, don't look away, because that's how she gets in. I don't remember when I first noticed her. Maybe it was the second week after I moved into the house. I'd bought the place for a steal, something about the previous owner leaving in a hurry and the realtor wanting to be rid of it quickly. I didn't ask questions. A quiet 2-story on the edge of a dying town sounded perfect. I wanted peace. I just lost my brother, and silence was easier than grief. She was always at the window. The little girl. She stood in the second-floor window of the house across the street. I thought it was empty, boarded up, curtains drawn, weeds climbing the porch. Yet there she was, pale face pressed to the glass, watching, always watching. At first, I thought it was some kind of trick. Maybe I was seeing reflections, or it was a child who'd wandered in to explore the old house. But when I waved, she didn't move. When I stared back, she didn't blink. Her hair was long and dark, tangled over her shoulders. She wore a blue dress, too thin for the cold. Her mouth never opened. Her expression never changed. I told myself it didn't matter. I closed my blinds at night and tried to forget. But it's hard to forget something that doesn't forget you. A week later, I found muddy footprints on my porch. Small ones, bare feet, too small to belong to an adult. They led up to my door, stopped at the welcome mat, then disappeared. No prints leading away. That night, I locked every window and bolted the front door. I turned on all the lights. Still, I couldn't stop the feeling, like something was breathing behind my neck, watching, waiting. I stayed up drinking until dawn. When the sun rose, I dared to peek through the blinds. She was still there. But now, her hand was pressed to the glass, palm open. I went across the street later that day. I needed to prove to myself that no one was living there, that I wasn't losing it. The front door of the house was padlocked. The porch sagged under my weight. Windows were coated in grime. But I saw no girl, no sign of anyone. I walked around back and could see that one of the cellar doors hung open. I shouldn't have gone down, but I did. Flashlight trembling in my hand, I stepped into the damp dark. It smelled like rot, like soil and something sourer. There were toys scattered in the corner, dolls with glass eyes, their faces cracked, a child's rocking horse with a long split down its neck, and something else. Scratches, deep grooves in the brick wall, hundreds of them, like fingernails clawing to get out. I turned to leave, but that's when I heard it. A giggle, not joyful, not playful. It was the sound of something pretending to be a little girl. I ran and didn't look back. The next day, I boarded up my windows, every last one. I called the town's records office, asked who owned the house across the street. The woman on the phone paused. "That property's condemned," she said. "Has been since the fire." "Fire?" "Yeah, 20 years ago. Family of 3. Parents died in the blaze. No remains were ever found of the daughter. They think she started it." "What was her name?" I asked. She hesitated again. "Lily," she said. "Lily Kemp." That night, I dreamt of her. She had Lily's face, but it wasn't hers. It stretched too far, cracked around the eyes. Her mouth peeled open too wide, like someone splitting an orange. She whispered from across my bed.
I saw you see me.
I woke up screaming. I tried leaving, packed a bag, got in my car, turned the key, but the engine was dead. It just wouldn't start. When I opened the hood, I found something stuffed inside the engine, a doll's head. Its mouth had been sewn shut. Its eyes were glassy and wet, like it had been crying. That night, I heard footsteps in my attic. Slow, bare feet, dragging. I started sleeping with a knife. I didn't eat much. I didn't shower. Every mirror in the house was turned to face the wall. She was in them. Not directly, but I'd catch her shape just behind me. A blur of blue. The glint of eyes too black to reflect light. I tried to burn sage, salt the doors, pray. But this thing, it wasn't a ghost. It was a hunger. It wanted to be seen. It wanted to be remembered. And I had looked too long. Last night she knocked on the front door. She knocked again, then again, each one louder than the last. Then she started laughing, not a child's laugh. A deep, rasping cackle, like someone choking on smoke. The door rattled. The boards on my window shook. Light bulbs burst overhead, then silence. I peeked through the slats. She was standing on my porch, staring up at me, smiling. I don't know how this ends. I haven't slept in days. The house stinks like burnt sugar and soil. I see her now, inside the house, at the top of the stairs. She's not moving, just watching. Every time I close my eyes, I see the fire. I see her screaming with joy as the walls melt around her, but her face doesn't burn. She only smiles.